He expected cheers. He expected headlines soaked in praise. But what Donald Trump didn't expect on that blazing June day was silence. Or worse, Jasmine Crockett. The air in Washington, D.C. was thick, almost suffocating, as the sun bore down on Constitution Avenue. It was June 14, 2025, Flag Day, and also Donald Trump's 79th birthday. The streets were lined with sweltering bodies, sweat-drenched shirts, and uneasy expressions. This was supposed to be a grand celebration of the U.S. Army's 250th anniversary. At least, that's what the flyer said. But the energy in the crowd felt strange. Disconnected. Like a stage play where no one remembered the lines. Tanks rolled down the boulevard, rattling storefronts and setting off distant car alarms. Helicopters buzzed overhead in tight formation. A few high school bands marched awkwardly, horns squeaking out of sync, trying to fill the void between the roars of armored vehicles. Spectators clapped politely, but the cheers never came. No one was really sure what they were witnessing. Some squinted through the heat waves, others shifted uncomfortably on their feet. It was loud. It was expensive. It was meant to impress. But instead, it felt hollow. Forced. Like the whole thing had been rehearsed for a different purpose. Veterans groups had been debating for weeks about attending. Some had supported the gesture. Others were deeply uncomfortable, especially when the price tag leaked more than $45 million. Not for wounded soldiers. Not for housing or care. But for a spectacle. Hotel rooms were snapped up by campaign donors and influencers flown in from red states, most with no ties to the military whatsoever. Several retired generals quietly declined their invites. They didn't say much. They didn't have to. The absence was enough. Because what unfolded that afternoon didn't look like a salute to service. It looked like a tribute to one man. And there he was at the center of it all, sitting in a gold and red painted golf cart, waving like royalty. Trump. Flanked by aides in perfectly staged positions, military protocol bent just enough to give him the spotlight. Active duty officers stood stone-faced along the sidewalks, unsure whether to salute or stay still. One Marine sergeant, speaking to a local reporter on condition of anonymity, summed it up in 6 words: "This doesn't feel like our parade." The atmosphere grew heavier by the hour. Protesters stood their ground at key intersections. They held signs that read, "Honor vets, not egos," and "Parades don't pay rent." Others stood in silent defiance, American flags in hand upside down. A symbol of distress. One group sat cross-legged in camouflage, not moving, each holding a cardboard sign with handwritten statistics: mental health, suicide, homelessness. Some passers-by ignored them. Others stopped, silently reading. But everyone felt something shift in their chest. Because that message? It cut deeper than a flyover. White House Press Secretary Marian Tisdale was asked about the backlash. She dismissed it with a practiced smile. "This is a beautiful celebration of our troops," she said. "Any criticism is just noise." But the noise wasn't going away. And people weren't buying it. Local businesses along the parade route complained that crowds didn't bring customers, just blocked sidewalks. Many had to board up windows in case things got ugly. Ordinary citizens exchanged puzzled glances. Why now? Why like this? Why $45 million for this? That evening, major networks replayed the footage in loop, Trump grinning in his shiny cart, tanks rumbling behind him, people clapping without smiling. Then came the commentary. Then came the questions. And finally came the viral storm. A YouTube video titled "The Emperor's Parade" showed Trump waving to a slow-motion soundtrack, while a sarcastic narrator listed each vehicle like a carnival ride. It racked up over 5 million views in less than a day. But even with all the jokes, all the hashtags, no one had really said what people were thinking. Not yet. That changed 3 days later. Cable news was still drowning in the aftermath. Conservatives praised it as a show of strength. Progressives called it a distraction. The rest of the country? Tuning out. Until Jasmine Crockett sat down for what was supposed to be a standard interview. MSNBC's afternoon show The Ledger had brought her in to talk inflation. Basic economic talking points. But right before the commercial break, host Keisha Bramwell asked one last question off script. "Congresswoman, any thoughts on the parade?" Crockett paused, smiled just slightly, and leaned forward like she was letting the truth weigh itself in her mouth before setting it free. "That wasn't a military tribute," she said, her voice calm, unwavering. "That was a birthday tantrum. With tanks." Boom. She didn't flinch. Didn't blink. Just kept going. "We've got veterans sleeping under bridges. And this man wants us to cheer while he plays emperor in a golf cart? That's not patriotism. That's performance." The studio went quiet. Keisha Bramwell blinked, stunned, but Jasmine? She was already done. A nod. A thank you. Cut to newsroom. Within the hour, that clip was everywhere. By sundown, the clip had spread like wildfire. Twitter, TikTok, Instagram Reels, all echoing one phrase: birthday tantrum with tanks. Before midnight, it wasn't just trending, it was exploding. Hashtags like hashtag tantrum parade, hashtag commander in petty, and hashtag golf cart general soared to the top. And for the first time in weeks, Americans weren't just scrolling, they were sharing with purpose. Teachers in Pennsylvania. Veterans in Texas. Single moms in Georgia. They all reposted Jasmine Crockett's remarks with captions like, "Finally, someone said it." And "This is the leadership we've been waiting for." Late-night shows jumped in like sharks smelling blood. On The Firehouse, host Glenn Marks opened his monologue with a still image of Trump in his parade cart, squinting beneath a canopy of shade. "Nothing says strength," he quipped, like hiding under an umbrella while soldiers march in full-body armor. The audience roared. He played Crockett's clip, not once, but twice. The next morning, even international media couldn't ignore it. British tabloids dubbed her the politician who dared. A Canadian anchor simply said that was brutal and deserved. But it wasn't the punchlines that stuck. It was the gut-level honesty behind them. The unfiltered frustration of a country trying to make sense of its priorities. Because Jasmine Crockett had said what millions were thinking. Rent prices were climbing. Groceries were getting tighter. And while Americans respected the military, they didn't want to see their struggles paraded around like campaign confetti. In Omaha, Nebraska, a 53-year-old veteran named Craig Hodges posted a grainy Facebook video. "I served 2 tours," he said, looking straight into the camera. "I'm proud of it. But that parade wasn't for us. That was for one man's ego. Congresswoman Crockett? She told the truth. Period." The video hit 6 million views in less than a day. Back in Mar-a-Lago, Trump stewed in silence for nearly 24 hours, something almost unheard of. His inner circle leaked that he had watched the clip dozens of times. He called Crockett another Maxine Waters wannabe. His aides tried to spin the backlash as a blip. But Republican strategists weren't so sure. She didn't flinch. Because Crockett hadn't just caused a stir. She'd cut through the noise. And people listened. When the silence finally broke, it shattered loudly. On the morning of June 18th, Trump launched a barrage of Truth Social posts. All caps. 5 back-to-back. First, he mocked Jasmine's intelligence. Then, accused her of hating the troops. Then came the big swing, calling her a disgrace to Congress and claiming she was spitting on real patriots. Cable news scrambled. Breaking. Trump responds to Crockett flashed across the bottom of screens. Anchors read each post aloud, some stuttering mid-sentence. In Phoenix, one anchor paused and muttered, "He's clearly rattled." But Trump wasn't done. That same afternoon, he stepped onto a rally stage in Macon, Georgia community college football field, oversized flags, LED screens looping parade footage like a patriotic fever dream. The crowd was thick, but the energy? Off. For 20 minutes, he stuck to the greatest hits. Biden, borders, inflation. But then, he waved off the teleprompter and leaned in. "You all seen that Congresswoman from Texas?" he asked, voice dripping with disdain. "What's her name again?" "Jasmine. Jasmine Crockpot." Laughter. Some booze. Some silence. "She gets on fake news and mocks our parade. Says I rode around like an emperor in a golf cart? Well, guess what? I earned that cart." There were cheers, yes. But not the roaring thunder Trump was used to. They were scattered. Uneven. Still, he went on. "She thinks she's clever. Thinks she's tough. But these low IQ radicals, these angry nobodies, they don't love America. They love TikTok views. 8 minutes. 9. Nearly 10 on Jasmine Crockett alone. Behind the scenes, even his own advisors were growing anxious. It was personal. It was mean. And it wasn't landing the way they hoped. Journalists asked Crockett's office for comment. But she didn't respond. Not yet. She waited. Then came Sunday. That evening, Jasmine Crockett appeared on State Watch, a no-frills political show known for unfiltered interviews. The host, Calvin Reiner, didn't dance around. "Congresswoman," he began, "the former president spent nearly 10 minutes attacking you by name. Care to respond?" She didn't flinch. "You know what I noticed," she said, cool as ever. "He never once answered what I actually said. Not once. He name-called. Tried to humiliate me. But I don't scare easy." Then came the line that broke the internet again. "He called me angry? Maybe I am. Angry that we're spending millions on tanks while families choose between rent and food. Angry that we ignore veterans until photo op season. Angry that we've normalized nonsense." Pause. "I'd rather be righteously angry than proudly delusional." Mic drop. The clip went viral faster than the first one. Hashtags lit up again. Hashtag truth not tanks. Hashtag commander and petty. Hashtag Jasmine was right. The energy wasn't just coming from her base anymore. It was wider now. Deeper. Trump's team tried to walk it back. She disrespected veterans, they claimed. Trump was just defending their honor. But veterans groups weren't having it. A national organization of post 9/11 service members issued a statement that made headlines. "We didn't feel honored. We felt used." Crockett said what a lot of us were already thinking. The shift was seismic. Trump had tried to bury her in insults. Instead, he handed her a microphone. And Jasmine? She wasn't finished yet. Tuesday arrived with tension hanging in the air like storm clouds no one wanted to name. On Capitol Hill, the buzz wasn't just about legislation, it was about one name, Jasmine Crockett. CSPAN's cameras were already rolling. People weren't just watching for policy, they were waiting for something more. All morning, Jasmine sat quietly in the chamber. No grand entrances. No theatrical glances. Just her head down, taking notes, listening. Like she always did. But just after 1:15 p.m., she rose. Calmly. Deliberately. And everything stopped. The chamber didn't go fully silent, but the air changed. Conversations dropped to murmurs. Eyes lifted from glowing phone screens. Some in that room had stayed silent while Trump attacked her. Others had joined the chorus. But now they all looked up. She requested 5 minutes to speak. She didn't storm the podium. She didn't shout. She simply walked to the microphone like someone who had something honest to say and didn't need noise to say it. "I wasn't planning to speak today," she began, her voice steady. "But since I've been dragged through every news network in the country for having an opinion, I think it's only fair I speak plainly, right here, where the record counts." A shuffle of papers. A few coughs. But no interruptions. "I stand by what I said. Every word. Not because it was popular. Not because it went viral. But because it was true." She inhaled light, but enough to let the weight of her words land. "We spent $45 million on a parade that didn't feed a single homeless veteran. We applauded a man in a gold golf cart and called it patriotism. That's not love for country. That's theater." On the Republican side, a few arms crossed. Others kept typing like they weren't listening. But they were. She shifted her tone softer now. Not gentler. Just more personal. "I've spoken with mothers who can't afford insulin. Teachers buying school supplies out of pocket. Veterans who haven't had a mental health checkup in 5 years." She looked up. "They didn't ask me to be polite about waste. They asked me to fight it." And in that moment, it no longer felt like a political statement. It felt like a testimony. "I wasn't sent here to smile for cameras," she said, her voice still quiet but more resolute. "I was sent here to serve people who never get parades, people who are invisible until election season." By then, the whole chamber had gone still. No interruptions. No laughter. Just presence. "If calling out a $45 million vanity project makes me radical, I'll wear that like a badge. She ended without theatrics. No fist raised. No dramatic exit. She simply returned to her seat, sat down, and folded her notes. The room didn't erupt in applause, it wasn't that kind of room. But on the Democratic side, a ripple of subtle nods moved down the row. One older Republican across the aisle looked up, met her eyes, and dipped his chin in quiet acknowledgement. Outside, the press pool had already caught wind. Phones buzzed. Laptops clicked. The video hit Twitter before she even left the building. Hashtags that had cooled reignited in minutes. Hashtag truth not tanks. Hashtag Jasmine was right. Hashtag this is leadership. But it wasn't just the internet that shifted, it was the tone. People stopped calling her fiery. They started calling her clear. Focused. Real. Even conservative journalist Andy McRae tweeted, "I don't agree with her politics. But she just handled that chamber like a professional." We don't see that often anymore. That mattered. Because in those 5 minutes, just 5, Jasmine Crockett didn't just survive the political firestorm. She reframed it. She wasn't the punchline anymore. She was the one holding the mirror. Outside the marble walls of Congress, people were tuning in, some for the first time in years. The clip of her speech found its way into group chats, waiting rooms, car rides. And something about it stuck. It was the lack of performance. The lack of spin. She didn't yell. She didn't beg. She just told the truth. In a language people could recognize. In a tone they could trust. Morning shows replayed her words between traffic updates and weather reports. DJs who usually stuck to music paused to say, "I don't care what party she's in." That woman made sense. And across the country, people weren't just talking about Jasmine Crockett, they were remembering her. Her office inbox overflowed. Over 1,400 emails in a single afternoon. Subject lines like, "Thank you. Finally. You said it." A public school teacher in Spokane wrote, "You gave voice to what I've been feeling for years." A former Marine in Arizona sent a handwritten letter, "You didn't disrespect us. You defended us." And through it all, Jasmine stayed quiet. No victory laps. No clapbacks. Just one pinned message on her feed. "We need fewer parades. More policies. I said what I said." That one sentence became a rallying cry. Nurses. Veterans. Teachers. Moms. Union workers. People who didn't usually have a voice, they saw themselves in her. Not because she was perfect, but because she was present. Because she didn't blink. But behind the support, something darker was brewing. Because when you speak truth in public, especially truth that threatens power, there are always those who want to punish it. The backlash was coming. And Jasmine Crockett? She was ready for that too. The louder her truth echoed, the darker the shadows became. What started as admiration soon turned into attacks. Because in today's internet politics, praise doesn't come alone. It comes with punishment. At first, it was subtle. Right-wing blogs posted old, blurry photos of Jasmine at a college party. One claimed she had ties to radical groups. Another twisted quotes from her public defender years to paint her as anti-police. Then came the YouTubers, foaming at the mouth for clicks. Woke alert. Jasmine Crockett hates America, and she thinks she's better than you. Millions watched. It wasn't journalism, it was demolition. Digitally orchestrated character assassination. Some claimed she was funded by foreign governments. Others said her speech was ghostwritten by Hollywood consultants. A few spun conspiracies that she was a plant for deep state operatives. Ridiculous. But dangerous. Because it didn't stop there. Threats started flooding in. Her inbox, once filled with gratitude, began to crawl with slurs. Racial insults. Fake photos. Messages telling her to watch her back. Some were anonymous. Some were signed with first names, as if that made it less hateful. Her team took immediate action. Jasmine's personal number was changed. Her mother was quietly relocated to a relative's house outside Fort Worth. Capitol Police increased her security detail. They'd seen this before. Viral moments turned violent quickly in this era. And then came the worst of it. One morning, walking through the underground tunnel to her office, Jasmine's aide, Ashanti, walked beside her with phone in hand. "You've been doxxed," she whispered. Jasmine stopped mid-step. "They posted your home address. Your parents too. It's all over Reddit." Jasmine didn't gasp. Her face didn't flinch. She just nodded and said, "All right then. We keep moving." But inside, she was burning. Not with fear for herself, but with rage. Rage for her mother. Rage for the families who now had to keep their curtains closed because she told the truth. That night, she called her father. He picked up on the second ring. "I'm fine, baby," he said before she could speak. "And don't you dare slow down." She didn't. In fact, she leaned in harder. A week later, Jasmine Crockett held a press conference, not at the Capitol. Not on TV. Just outside her district office in Dallas. A cheap podium, 3 reporters, and about 30 people standing in the sun. No fanfare. No flags. Just a stack of papers in her hands. "I've been called every name you can imagine this week," she began. Some of them old. Some of them brand new. She held up the first stack. "These? Threats. Cowards behind keyboards." Then she held up another. "These? Letters from veterans. These are why I said what I said." She locked eyes with the cameras. Her voice calm. Unapologetic. "If you think 10 fake photos and a few angry trolls are going to shut me up, you've got the wrong woman." The clip didn't trend immediately. But those who saw it? They felt something deeper. Respect. Loyalty. A sense that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't about politics anymore. It was about something real. A retired Army colonel in San Diego left her a voicemail. "I didn't vote for you. Probably never will. But you've got guts. I respect that." A Vietnam veteran in Boise mailed a letter, handwritten. "You didn't lie. You just finally said what others were too afraid to." And then came the quiet moment that landed harder than all the threats combined. It was after a late committee session. The halls of the Capitol were nearly empty. Jasmine walked toward the exit alone. As she passed a uniformed officer in the hallway, he slowed, looked at her, and whispered, "We heard you. Not all of us agreed with that parade either. Keep talking." She didn't respond. Just nodded slightly, her eyes steady. Because while the attacks were loud, the support was quiet. Personal. Human. It was in the folded notes. The whispered comments. The emails that began with, "I never write politicians, but..." But then something happened. Something no one, especially Trump, expected. It started with a single video, early on a Friday morning. No fancy production. No network backing. Just a man sitting on the tailgate of a rusted truck in Bakersfield, California. American flag behind him, waving in the wind. "My name's Leo Garrison. Retired Army. 2 Gulf tours," he said, squinting into the camera. "And I've got something to say." His voice was rough, like gravel. His shirt wrinkled, collar bent. "I watched that parade. Watched it with my granddaughter. And to be real with you, it made me sick." He paused. Swallowed. That wasn't a tribute. That was a circus. Then came the moment. When Congresswoman Crockett spoke. I felt seen. "Some of y'all act like she spat on the flag." She didn't. She stood up for the people who wore the uniform. The ones who come home and can't get a dentist appointment. The ones sleeping in tents in Phoenix. "I'm tired of being a damn prop." He looked down, then back up. If a black woman from Texas has the guts to say it out loud, I'm backing her. The video was shared 500,000 times that day. Then 1 million. Local news picked it up. Then national outlets. And that opened the floodgates. Veterans from every corner of the country began posting. Stories. Videos. Threads. Anger. Frustration. Relief. They weren't always polished. But they were real. A Navy officer in St. Paul posted from his kitchen, "That parade wasn't for us. It was for his ego." Jasmine Crockett didn't lie. She just broke the silence. A woman in Savannah, retired Air Force, wheelchair-bound, and a single mother, posted a thread about her years-long fight to access disability benefits. I didn't cry when she spoke. I exhaled. Finally, someone said it. CNN scrambled to keep up. They aired a segment titled "The Veterans Respond," featuring 4 former service members. Different races. different ages, all saying the same thing. Respect isn't bought with tanks. It's earned through action. Even the American Legion, normally apolitical, released a statement. Carefully worded, but firm. We acknowledge mixed reactions to the parade, and we praise leaders who advocate for real, tangible support for veterans' needs. That phrase, real, tangible support, wasn't a coincidence. It was a quiet nod. A confirmation. The ground was shifting. And Jasmine Crockett? She wasn't just a congresswoman anymore. She was becoming a movement. Back in D.C., things had changed. Jasmine Crockett no longer had to raise her voice to be heard. When she entered meetings, conversations paused. When she spoke, even those who disagreed listened. Not because she had power, but because she had something rarer in politics: credibility. Meanwhile, Trump kept posting. Rants turned longer, louder, more frantic. But the impact wasn't the same anymore. The more he shouted, the more he seemed stuck, like a man trying to yell down a tide that had already turned. And the contrast couldn't be clearer. There he was, clinging to a narrative built on spectacle and ego. And there she was, just doing the work. Jasmine hadn't asked to be a national voice. She hadn't auditioned for it. She didn't ride a wave of consultants or calculated optics. She got there by saying what needed to be said, out loud, when it counted. And when the country was spiraling through noise and distraction, people grabbed onto her voice like a life preserver. She didn't come with slogans. She didn't pitch perfection. She spoke from the gut and never stopped moving forward. Her story wasn't over. Not even close. But this chapter, this moment where she cracked open the silence, this would stay with people. Not because of the virality, but because of the clarity. She reminded Americans what accountability sounds like. What service looks like when it's stripped of ceremony. What patriotism feels like when it's rooted in people, not parades. And as hashtags cooled and headlines shifted, as cameras moved on, her words didn't fade. Because truth, when spoken clearly, doesn't need volume to echo. And the people? They remembered. They remembered a woman who stared down a machine and didn't blink. They remembered that she didn't run toward the fire, but through it. They remembered the quiet moments. The barbershops. The school letters. The tired vet whispering, "We heard you," in a hallway. They remembered what it felt like to be seen, not managed. What it felt like to be spoken to, not performed for. And if there was one thing this storm revealed, it was this. You don't need a parade to show strength. You don't need noise to tell the truth. You just need the courage to stand still while the world spins around you and say, "This isn't right." So if this story moved you, if it stirred something you haven't felt in a long time, something like hope, or anger, or clarity, don't let it end here. Speak up. Vote. Show up. Because silence doesn't serve anyone. And truth? It only works if we keep passing it on.